about to listen to the Dr. Daliah Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Daliah Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Daliah.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Dr. 1-877-DOCDALI. So this government shutdown, I think we're going into day 3 to 4 of this. And, we've been seeing this, I remember, since the 90s. I think that's when this all started. It might have started before then, but I really wasn't paying attention to the news much before then. But these shutdowns are ridiculous, but they happen because we just don't have long-term funding. There has to be a reevaluations and appropriations, and you guys know the politics better than I do. And so, but one thing these shutdowns do is they afford political parties the opportunity to be able to, one, get some media attention, and two, try to come up with some, let's say, resume builders when it comes to their reelection. And so when you see the politics and the BS that's happening, it's frustrating because we have a lot of federal workers whose jobs are on the line, not to mention a lot of us that don't work for the federal government as it pertains to TSA, as it pertains to travel, as it pertains to Social Security benefits, as it pertains to, I think IRS is still at full duty. I think IRS is considered essential, but still, some of us haven't got our tax refunds. As it pertains to what we need because we're paying taxes, it's very frustrating. It's not a good thing to have a government shut down because the spigots are off from the funding. Not good. And so the latest is, I believe the votes are at 55 to 45. Some Democrats are voting with Republicans to keep the continuing resolution going, to keep the funding going. And apparently it's the same bill, from what I understand, that was during the Biden administration. So it's something that bipartisanly there was agreement. What makes this different is the Democrats are wanting to use this opportunity to reverse some of the big, beautiful bill clauses that they disliked, that had to do with health care, that had to do with a variety of things. And so a big point of contention is funding that would include illegal immigrants and their health care needs. Even though the Democrats say, no, that's just what the Republicans are saying, it's a red herring. The Republicans are saying, well, they're bringing in the big, beautiful bill when this is supposed to be separate. We could always discuss the other stuff later. And so my prediction is there's supposed to be another vote happening within the next, I think, few minutes. But if 5 more Democrats don't, bipartisanly, support keeping the government open, it's going to continue. The shutdown's going to continue. And, it's interesting because I love looking at political strategy. And so, is this a good strategy for the Democrats? Because they don't have a lot of wins with this administration because they don't have control of the House or the Senate. They barely, the Republicans only have a slim majority, which is why things like this are getting stuck. But, is this the only opportunity for the Democrats to try to make some, political changes and try to make some legislative changes, or does it make them look bad? I think it's the latter. If this continues to be called the Schumer shutdown, if it looks like that, and the Republicans were kind of smart on this, calling it the clean bill and showing it's only 24 pages and reiterating that this is something that really isn't anything legislative. The big, beautiful bill passed. That's separate. This is just for government funding. We're not injecting anything into it. It's not. And they're trying to position themselves because it makes the Republicans look bad, too, having a government shut down. Because what the Democrats can say is, look, when Trump was in power, we were shut down for X amount of months. So from what I understand, many of the progressive Democrats are saying to hold the line, because if they could show that a government was shut down, it will reflect historically on the Trump administration. We all may see the little semantics and what's going on and the back and forth, but if the Republicans don't hold a large enough majority and they have to work with Democrats and the Democrats don't fund it, it'll ultimately, in Wikipedia and all that, fall on Trump. Now, Trump, as a result, said, well, if we're going to be shut down, then I might as well save money. So things that I don't think are necessary and are a part of waste, fraud, and abuse, or departments that I don't think are essential. I mean, if we have non-essential workers now furloughed, we could actually see what is really necessary. And so Trump might use this to his advantage to see, okay, we have a whole department closed. Did we really suffer? Do we really need all those people coming back? So for those people who work for the federal government, they're like, the longer this goes, the more worrisome this is. Nobody wants to think that their job is not essential. Nobody wants to think that, they want to think that when their job is gone, then everything falls apart. And sometimes things do fall apart. But then again, if the government has always, worked with the, barometer of mediocrity, and Trump has the, people think the government isn't working efficiently anyway, we might as well save some money. In fact, Trump has been floating the idea of giving $2,000 checks to Americans, not from the Doge cuts, but from the tariff money coming in, which I think is actually a smart move, because for the American taxpayers to hear, all right, we saved money, we spent money, we saved money, all they see is them paying taxes. So to get some money back might keep them engaged more. But I think the Democrats don't have a lot to lose in the short term if they can, make it look like, well, the shutdown is all the Republicans' fault. The problem is if the voters are smart and they're seeing what's going on, they might tell their senators, come on. Okay, this is ridiculous. I got family that works for the government. I got to fly. The shutdown, you can't really operate well with the shutdown. I mean, luckily our defense and our military is still working and all, but it's not a good look overall. In the short term, the Democrats could look really bad. In the long run, it might help them in the next election, but I think the average American is seeing what's going on. So my recommendation is, look, if there are things that you didn't like with the big, beautiful bill, I didn't like the name of the big, beautiful bill, but some things in that were really, really necessary, the tax breaks, et cetera, then, you can make a point, and you can bring up resolutions and bring up, we could do all the legislative work, separate if this is a separate issue. But if we need to fund the government, let's just fund the government and keep these other things separate. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH. Dr. Daliah here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Hi, it's Mark Falter, host of the Financial Fitness Show. I strongly believe that no one should ever pay 1 penny more in taxes than they are legally obligated. Unfortunately, for most hardworking Americans, this just isn't the case. Why? Because most people spend more time planning next weekend's getaway than trying to ensure they're going to pay less in taxes. My financial fitness team has put together some materials that I know are going to help you. It's the Tax Savings Kit. Tax Savings Kit includes 3 things: free tax analysis, top 10 ways to pay less in taxes, and an investor's guide to taxes. Now, how do you get it? Simple. 866-764-2635. Again, 866-764-2635. I'm Mark Falter. This is Financial Fitness, making personal finance profitable.
back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Daliah, 1-877 DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to you all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Daliah, Facebook, The Dr. Daliah Show, and on YouTube. Click like and subscribe. So I get these alerts from the local news stations, and they keep beeping and telling me a cyclist just got hit or a pedestrian just got killed. And we keep hearing. Now, I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I could just imagine what some other cities, are dealing with as it pertains to pedestrian and cyclist fatalities and accidents. And what we're hearing are the numbers are on the rise. And a very interesting study from a law firm, Wagner and Reese, said that has actually ranked the most dangerous cities. They say in the first half of 2024, 3,300 pedestrians were killed in the United States, a 48% increase from a decade ago. As for bikelists, 1,000 of them die in crashes across the country every single year. I had a friend who died in a bicycle crash. I think he was riding near a bus and he got sucked in, and then it was horrible, just horrific. And we want people to walk. We want people to bike, but as I drive to work, I really have to be mindful because I assume the cyclists are going to be in their lane and in their bicycle lane. There are bicycle lanes, but some of them are in the street, for unknown reasons. Is it that the bicycle lane is inadequate and there's a lot of unevenness to it? Is there debris? Is it that they need to eventually make a turn? And so we think that the pedestrians are going to be on the sidewalk, the cyclists are going to be in their bike paths, and we're hitting them. And unfortunately, where I live, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, we rank number 5 in terms of pedestrian fatality and cyclist fatality. So the law firm did a compilation of data. They examined where cyclists and pedestrians face the highest and lowest risk of fatal crashes. The data was compiled from nearly 300 U.S. cities using pedestrian accident statistics and bicycle accident statistics related to death, state-level benchmarks, and infrastructure scores to create an overall risk score. They said Baton Rouge, Louisiana, led the nation with the highest combined fatality rate for cyclists and pedestrians. New York City, Irvine, and Boston ranked the safest, scoring low in fatalities and high in infrastructure. Really, NYC. California and Florida cities dominate the danger list, they say. Multiple cities included in the top 20. Walk and bike scores alone don't guarantee safety, they said. Some cities still that have decent infrastructure in place still report high death rates. And the top, shall we say, the top 10 they listed for the most dangerous with overall scores are Baton Rouge, Tucson, Arizona, Jacksonville, Florida, San Bernardino, California, and Las Vegas, Nevada, rounding out the top 5. Then came Albuquerque, New Mexico, Detroit, Michigan, Tampa, Florida, Glendale, Arizona, and Phoenix, Arizona. The safest, allegedly, cities in this include, if I can get my full list here, I believe Frisco, Texas, Irvine, California, New York City, and Boston, Massachusetts, and Lincoln, Nebraska, rounding out the top of the cities. So why? What's going on here? So there's a few things, okay? One is, we do have a higher population. We do have increased traffic. That's something to be aware of. But we're going to have to kind of, talk about some things that I know a lot of people don't talk about. They'll think it's more politically charged. It's not politically charged. These are, when you're a doctor and you're looking at, fatality, you're looking at numbers and you're looking at patients. Okay, we kind of have to look at it in a very neutral, nonpartisan lens. And so we have a few issues going on. All right. One is people are very, very distracted. They're listening to their music. I never drive in a car without music. I always have to have my music and I always have to be singing. And because now with my hearing, I'm even playing it a little louder than I used to. Not to mention, I'm noticing pedestrians and cyclists have their earbuds in and, or AirPods or whatever. And I don't blame them. When I work out, I want to listen to my music. So we don't have people listening as much. If they do have the ability to listen to traffic, many of our cars are starting to get quieter. I find it very interesting that now they've had to add sounds to electric vehicles. With electric vehicles, they were bragging about how quiet they were. Well, that was proved kind of dangerous. And when we talk about Halloween safety in a few weeks, kids need to realize that they're not going to hear the vroom, vroom, of cars. Now cars are a lot quieter. And even though, yes, I would like us to limit noise pollution, I, as a kid, could always hear a car coming down the bend. These cars from the 70s and 80s were noisy suckers. Now there are cars. I'm walking the dog, and if it wasn't for, me seeing maybe a shift in some of the leaves on the ground as I'm turning a corner, I would not know a car was coming. That's how quiet they are. So they've had to add sounds. Another thing is we do have, and this is something that's been reported in the news, individuals that come to this country that are not as aware of our laws. And so, I'm driving down the street and there's a school bus, and the school bus has their stop sign. So I stop, but there's other people driving. No, if it's on the other side of the street and there's no divider or meridian, you have to stop because kids are crossing the street to go to the school bus. People aren't aware of whether they're here legally or whether they're citizens or not. People aren't that aware of the rules. We take our test when we're 16 years old for driver's ed. When do we have to retest? And so what if the rules change? So there's a lot of individuals that don't understand the rules, or they have different rules where they live, and then they come to America so that's a concern. I live in an area where there's always construction. Our state flower is the orange cone. Our state tree is the orange cone. All I see in Nevada are orange cones. Now, I don't think it's officially our state tree or bird, but there's always some sort of construction going on. And so if you do have a cyclist or you do have a pedestrian that, can't necessarily use that sidewalk, and they're seeing a couple blocks ahead going, I'm going to have to get around this because there's going to be dirt, or they're going to be on the street. Now, another thing I'm also noticing is many individuals get into this habit of I'm right, so everybody has to work around me. Now, the reason why we learn that pedestrians and cyclists have the right of way, or when you're boating, a smaller boat, a sailboat has the right of way, is, because if you have a bigger vehicle and if you have more power, why do you get the right of way? You got to allow people who are more vulnerable to have the right of way. By the way, but they say the majority of the fatalities happen with our bigger vehicles like our trucks and our SUVs. That could also be because we can't see, but they say the added size and weight of these vehicles mean people are 50 or 100% more likely to die from their injuries. And that makes sense. The bigger the car, but when I'm driving and I'm trying to get to work and then I see a cyclist not on their bike path and they're actually driving, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's really in my lane. I'm going to have to switch lanes. I do it. But there's a lot of people going, whoa, 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 I need to be in the right lane. I'm going to be making a turn. I need to stay in the right lane. Now, you're going to have that flexibility of leaving the lane. You're rarely going to be cited for failing, shall we say, driver rules if you're doing it to avoid a fatality. All right, I am sure the cop is going to let you off or the courts are going to let you off. But I see a lot of times it's that right lane. And people but I need to be in the right lane. This is where I'm supposed to be. They're wrong. They're not supposed to be in the middle of the street. You're right. And I have cyclist friends. And I'm like, what the hell are your buddies doing? Okay, they're ticking us off. Yeah. If not, then your bike lane is going to be that middle, double lane in the middle of the street. If not, I'm going to tell you guys to just bike there because at least my right lane is going to be free. But for those of us that understand you have to be flexible, you'll move. I see others are not flexible. They're like, no, this is my lane. I got the right of way. I'm supposed to be here. They're wrong. Their wrong doesn't save their life. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is kill somebody over semantics. So you have to understand. Another thing, too, is many of these pedestrians that I think are getting hurt not only are distracted, but I think some of them might have mental illness. So we hear, I keep getting these notifications that somebody was jaywalking or somebody was across the street and they got killed. And you're like, well, what were they doing in the street? And I've seen this. I'll just be driving. All of a sudden, there's just somebody standing in the street. And they could be dehydrated. Could be heat illness. They could be getting hypothermic. but they don't seem to be all there. And you're like, okay, you need to get to the side. Do I need to call you an ambulance? Do you? But they're just out. And so if you're driving and you're thinking that my 3-lane road now is going to be pure sailing at 45 miles an hour, you could possibly run into somebody that just isn't supposed to be there. So be aware that these statistics are rising, especially coming up on Halloween. And even if you technically have you think you're doing the right thing as it pertains to traffic laws, understand that things can happen with a bike or a pedestrian. 1-877 Doc Dali.
Looking for a gift that can actually help secure someone's future? It's Mark Falter's new book, Common Sense Income Strategies. It makes the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using time-tested strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. To learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Secure your future with Common Sense Income Strategies by Mark Falter. Again, to learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dali, 1-877 DOCDALI. So, no bones about it. I mean, I think President Donald Trump is a badass. And I think he is one of the toughest presidents we've had in a while. And if anybody was going to get our hostages back out of Gaza and Hamas's control, if anybody was going to get, the Russian-Ukraine war to stop, if anybody was going to prevent China from invading Taiwan, I think Trump has the best chance. I know a lot of people think he's doing it just to get the Nobel Peace Prize. I think there's other advantages too, and I think he really, really does want these wars to stop. And I do believe he, it's also about stopping the killing, and he meets with the hostages and their families. So this isn't just about an award, especially since the award is kind of, taken, a few different, shall we say, different turns. I think Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize and he was only in office like a couple weeks, so it's, I don't really care about awards like that. So I personally think that there's a lot more to gain, and peace in the Middle East is huge for the U.S. If the U.S. relies on Israel for a lot of their intelligence, and Israel does a lot of these countries' dirty work, because they always are get bad PR no matter what they do, and so they could get stuff done, such as with Iran, with the Houthis, and they can, Syria, and many of the countries thank them for it. On the other end, the Gaza, the war in Hamas, the longer it goes on, the worse it is for everybody. I don't understand why the whole world didn't come together on October 8th of 2023 to get those hostages out. People sat on their thumbs. We're having Christians murdered in Nigeria. We have so many religious persecutions. And what are all the these developed countries doing about it? And so the longer this war goes on, and we have civilians in Gaza and Hamas in control, it's not that civilians that could be at risk, and Hamas in control. It has to stop. So Trump came up with a 20-point plan, and Hamas was, we didn't get the plan yet. Once we do, we'll look at it. And they're going to stall, because Hamas knows that the only thing keeping them in the game are the hostages. That's why this has lasted so long. And they have them buried and hidden and barricaded by their citizens and children in their tunnels, and they're not impossible to get out, but I mean, I think Israel knows, how to get them out. It's just that would sadly affect civilians, and they're trying to do precision, strikes. And unfortunately, it's taken so long. There's been a lot of back and forth on if, day one, Israel should have just gone in, swinging before there could be more, burial and cryptic, hiding. But the tunnels were established for years. So Hamas has been in control of the area since 2006. So unfortunately, it was a really, really bad. It was a bad day in terms of the massacre. 1,200 people dying, multiple people injured, the rapes, the beheadings, it was just absolutely barbaric. And then, of course, the hostages taken. So we believe there's 20 still alive. How they're still alive is beyond me. And Godspeed. I hope we could get them back. And then, of course, the dead bodies that they're holding that are rotting. It's just it's horrific. So Trump has issued a warning to Hamas, saying that they will be given one last chance. This deal also spares the lives of all remaining Hamas fighters. He says we want the Israeli hostages freed and the agreement reached by Sunday evening, which, by the way, the agreement was also supported by other Muslim and Arab countries surrounding the area because they want peace too. People have asked me, they go, Dr. Daliah, there's so many enemies of Israel. Why aren't they coordinating? And well, they tried with the 6-day war. What happened? It only lasted 6 days. Many of these countries are not really in agreement of trying to do that again. They don't get along. Just like, a big issue that Gazans and Palestinians are having is these other countries don't want them. We think that it's just Jew versus Muslim or Israeli versus Arab. There are Arabs and Muslims in Israel that live peacefully and very happily with Jews. Our family have friends with Muslims, and they're not. For somebody to stereotype, individuals to think that they all want Israel gone or vice versa. No, it's not. They live very, I was in Israel, and I would probably say 30 to 40% of the population and I was in multiple cities: Tiberias, Nazareth, Haifa, Tel Aviv, Jaffa. There were maybe 45% of people I ran into were non-Israeli. They were Arab or Muslim, or and so you don't have a lot of agreement on what Hamas did, etc. However, you have the Americans, the liberal Americans going out and saying, "Oh yeah, they're this is Israel is bad, and they brought this on themselves." Like, really? It's sick to see what. So people who don't understand the situation don't understand the situation. They're spewing ridiculous sentiments and ridiculous false narratives. But in that region. So that's why we have the Avraham or the Abraham Accords, and that's why we have because you have other countries in the region that go, we do better when we're not fighting with Israel, and so you have some individuals of the thinking, well, we're sinning, if we at all recognize Israel, then we are doing bad, and we're gonna be damned to hell, but the rest of the people that aren't fanatic are like, actually, we have Israeli hospitals, they give aid, they keeping stability. So God forbid Israel is gone. You think there's going to be peace in the region? No, these other countries will fight with each other. So Trump had given a Sunday night deadline. He says, we will have peace in the Middle East one way or the other. The violence and bloodshed will stop. Release the hostages, all of them, including the bodies of those that are dead now. An agreement must be reached, Trump says, with Hamas by Sunday evening at 6, Washington, D.C. time. So multiple Middle Eastern nations, Israel, U.S., have agreed on a peace proposal. And that peace proposal basically will protect the current Hamas individuals. They won't be, I think, taken to courts but they do have to be demilitarized. They do have to be disarmed, and we free Palestine from Hamas. And there will be a peace governing body that Trump will lead. I really liked the idea. Gaza is on an exquisite piece of Mediterranean coast. It could really be turned into a beautiful area like Tel Aviv and Jaffa. Jaffa is one of the oldest ports in existence that's still there. And I mean, gosh, just exquisite. And Gaza is just, 30 minutes away from that along the Mediterranean. Beautiful real estate. It could be redone. And what Hamas has done with the area is disgusting. And what Hamas has done to their people. And these individuals who want to flee, because Israel will give leaflets. They'll say, look, we're coming in, leave. We're coming in. Very vocal about it. But we're hearing that they can't leave because Hamas won't let them. You can't be LGBTQAI plus in Gaza. You can't, they run to Israel, massacre people, rape, behead babies, come back, take hostages. And what do? Do they say, oh, we'll meet you on the battlefield? No, they hide behind their women and children. In fact, they even gave hostages to families and threatened them to hold them. So they're under duress. When I see free Palestine, I think Palestine needs to be freed from Gaza 100%. You're saying free from Israel, that's not making any sense because Israel's not running things there. So we'll see what happens with this red line that Trump made. 1-877-Doc Daliah, don't go away.
Hey guys, it's Clyde. We've had a lot of requests for Ground Zero merchandise, so we put together an online store with a big variety of high-quality items. I'm really excited to let you know about these things. We have a lot to offer you and your loved ones. In addition to our regular apparel, such as t-shirts, beanies, hoodies, and hats, we've expanded our product line with posters, flags, aprons, mugs, and a whole lot more. We also have Ground Zero collectibles along with a limited edition of items like a Clyde Lewis canvas portrait, a Ground Zero embroidered jacket that will certainly make for great gifts and for interesting conversations with family and friends. And we now offer publications such as Ron Patton's book about mind control, MK Zine, and back copies of the official magazine of Ground Zero while it was in print. Paranoia, the Conspiracy Reader, also coming in 2023, are updated and revised books that I've written. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. So shop today at our official store by going to groundzeromerch.com. Again, that's groundzeromerch.com.
Hi guys, Dr. Daliah here. Addictions can sneak up on us and come in many forms, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, video games, porn, or something less obvious such as food, internet, or shopping. Addiction can seem innocent at first and then evolve into an insurmountable evil. In our book, Addiction Basics, Caitlin Kalikas and I dive into the common addictions and provide tips for identifying and preventing these before they sneak in and take over our lives. Addiction Basics can be found on Amazon or my website, drdaliah.com. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Dr. Daliah, 1-877-DOC-DALI. Well, getting to some of your questions, Neil writes, does the pill have possible miscarriage risk later on, like damage to the uterus wall? And he's asking about the abortion pill. Does the abortion pill have possible miscarriage risk? Most studies say it doesn't. Most studies say, unlike the surgical abortion procedure, that can cause scarring and risk, the medical abortions being done at an early stage in pregnancy and more hormonally driven do not. So that's a good question. It's definitely shall we say, a more now common practice and more preferred by many of those providers that provide abortion services to do it medically and non-surgically, fewer risks. But, if somebody uses it multiple times, I haven't seen a lot of studies on what that could do. But at this point, they do feel that it is a safer option. 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOC-DALI. David is asking why more doctors don't speak out about Obamacare or healthcare issues, and why does every doctor he meets seem miserable, unquote. I didn't think about that till you wrote that, but yeah, I have not met a happy doctor. It's interesting. I was speaking to some I speak to some kids yesterday, and one was a high schooler, and his father is a doctor, and we're trying to talk him out of medicine. He wants to go into business, but I'm like, why am I doing that? I mean, I always wanted to be as a doctor, as a kid, and I love medicine, and I'm happy. Was not happy with Obamacare. Will probably never go back to private practice because Obamacare is still the law of the land, and the way it is with the deductibles and patient insurance not paying and patients having to pay, and patients either can't pay or don't pay their $40 or $25 or $50 or whatever they owe. It's a ridiculous business model now, so it's impossible. But why are doctors miserable? And then why aren't doctors, if they are so miserable, getting their act together and fixing things? I mean, that's a valid question. And I even asked that when I was in training. I'm like, look, people, why aren't doctors unionizing? Why aren't they negotiating rates? There's a lot we could do. Why are we just complaining? Now, rather than complain, why don't we get our act together and, get something done? And doctors aren't very political. You do have some. They're starting to get more political now that they saw, wow, Dr. Oz. I mean, he could make it to Dr. McCary. You could actually make it to the White House. You do have many now politically driven medical providers. Plus, you start to see now many more of the media, TikToking and Instagramming, because they're not making money in medicine. They're like, well, why don't I maybe, do what Dr. Daliah does and go to radio? Like, well, you don't make money in radio either. So it's funny because you see a lot of them try to be the next Dr. Oz. And when they realize they're not going to be the next Dr. Oz, they don't make money. Like, you know what, never mind. I'm going to go back to, just taking care of patients. But, I think a big issue I'm seeing is doctors don't agree. You got the doctors on the right and the doctors on the left, which really blows my mind because just like with law or being a judge, it should be pretty obvious what's in a patient's best interest. And I think that really scares the public when you have doctors and, like Dr. Fauci, and you have this back and forth like we had with COVID. I'm really blown away at some of these medical groups where they are very upset that RFK Jr. is saying, look, as it pertains to the COVID vaccine in 6-month-olds, we probably don't have to routinely give it to every 6-month-old and pregnant woman. Give it to those who are high risk. And if anybody else wants it, talk to your doctor and get a prescription. So anybody who wants it could still get it. And there are doctors against that. And I even talked to some of them. I'm like, wait a second. So I thought we were all about, we don't do too much. We don't do harm. We don't, the whole USPSTF, United Services Preventative Task Force. The reason why they don't say do self-breast exams, do thyroid cancer screenings, do, everybody should have testicular ultrasounds. They don't recommend that because they don't want to overdo. They think the risks could outweigh the benefits. They think they'll be over-diagnosing or over, stress of the patient and spending too much money, tax dollars, or whatever excuse it is. Yet they're very quick, to say, oh, okay, well, everybody should get a vaccine, even if they're healthy and they're 6 months old. And do we really know much about the mRNA vaccines and if they interfere with the child and their immunity as it pertains to, being able to gain the immunity they need from all the other vaccines. I mean, when you're giving 6 shots to a 6-month-old and you're going to add the COVID vaccine to that, is that necessary? For some infants, it might be, but for every single infant? And so I'm just as shocked as I think a lot of people are going, I thought, isn't that common sense? Another thing that I think is common sense is if somebody is not ill and they're on Medicaid and they're able-bodied and they don't have any, children or any real need to be home, why aren't there work requirements or school requirements or volunteer requirements? That makes no sense because every doctor who does workers' comp or has a patient who had a workers' comp injury is told to get them back to work, even if it's modified duty. If they break their arm, have them go back to work. I mean, assuming they don't need surgery, in their cast or splint, and don't use that arm. But the longer they're out of work, the worse it could be for them from a disability standpoint, and they'll never get back to work. So I don't understand why doctors aren't in agreement with the Medicaid work requirements. Only 20 hours a week, and these are able-bodied, non-injured individuals who could either go back to school, volunteer, or work. And I guess, there are some doctors where their religion is their politics now. And I find that very frustrating because it's also kind of hypocritical. I found it very hypocritical when I was trying to tell people, look, the masks you guys are wearing that are being mandated are not necessarily protecting you. You really need to have an N95. And even there was a study showing with the N95, the chemicals in them, you got to let it air out. Otherwise, you're breathing in these chemicals a lot because the average human is not supposed to be wearing medical, grade masks all the time. But if we did need protection against a very highly infectious and virulent respiratory illness, you're going to need something better than those reused blue surgical masks. And there were doctors debate not in agreement. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why? Because it was all about the politics. So I'm really frustrated by that. And then why are doctors miserable? David's not wrong. I've seen a lot of doctors out there miserable. Well, one thing that put me into a little less happy mood was, not seeing my kids grow up, dedicating, dedicating my whole life to my practice and patients, not seeing my kids grow up, and then, that wasn't cool. So I think a lot of people are burning out. 1-877-Doc-Daliah, don't go away. Hey guys, it's Dr. Daliah. Fantasy football season is coming, but sadly, too many of you are taking the bench while the country takes part in one of the most exciting and lucrative industries out there. Don't know how to play? Well, huddle up and listen. Paul Kalikas and I have written a fantasy football pocket guide for beginners. This book walks you through the basics and shows you how simple and lucrative joining or creating a fantasy football team can be. Read our fantasy football pocket guide for beginners found on Amazon or follow the links on X and Facebook. That's Fantasy Football Pocket Guides for Beginners. Don't be left out.
Increase fuel economy up to 7.9% with Hot Shot Secret Gasoline Extreme, the solution to maximize your engine's performance and fuel economy. Whether you're driving a sports car or a daily commuter, Gasoline Extreme is specially formulated with PEA to deep clean. Don't settle for an average driving experience. Upgrade to Hot Shot Secret Gasoline Extreme and go further on each tank. Order now on Amazon or HotShotSecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.